Because I can see the YouTube page and it's not happening.
No, it's not going. It's not live on YouTube.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, should we just do this? We'll be able to put this up on YouTube later.
Do we need to say anything?
Here we go. It's happening. I think it's happening.
Is it happening? There we go. It's on.
Yes, excellent. Well, sorry, this is our first time. Actually, it's not our first time doing a live. We've done one of these before. We're just a little bit sort of hazy about the technical details, aren't we?
We are indeed. And actually, I'm watching double screen at the moment, and I think it's quite behind, as in from our reality to where it is. So at the moment, I'm holding my chin, and I'm not holding my chin. So, there you go. So yeah, it's buffered quite a lot from our perspective. So.
Well, I think the important thing is just to pick up the chats and people's questions and things like that. So that's the important thing. But today we're talking about Algarve relocation questions, and we asked you guys to submit a few questions, and many of you have, which is great. But we just want to run through the process of the real basic process of relocating to Portugal, firstly, from our perspective. So obviously, I think there's 14 points in this plan. The first one is visas and immigration. So I think that when you establish that you actually want to come and move to Portugal, the most important thing is to see whether you legally can come and move to Portugal. So, but I mean, the thing is, I don't think anybody's ever been rejected, have they, Nick? We know.
Oh, no, we do. We know we've known of a couple, but I think it comes down to anomalies, not rejected in its entirety, but in terms of anomalies on some of the not providing enough banking information, or there being questioned on some banking information. But generally, I think no, I don't think anyone we don't know of anyone that's been said you cannot. But I think probably the biggest one is a criminal record, right? If you've got a bad criminal record, there's probably not much point of applying. But might be a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the money, let's just go over the money. Like, for example, but there's all different types of visas as well. But the most common visa that people are coming in on is the D7 visa. And if you are confused about visas, please go and have a look at the video that we've done with our lawyer, or just get in touch with us and you can get on a call with our lawyer and she can personally tell you exactly which visa is going to be suited for you. But regarding the most common visa that we help people on is the D7. And essentially you're going to have to pony up 820 euros per person per month, and then have that coming in as passive income. Correct, Nick?
It's a little bit higher. It's 860. It's basically in line with the minimum wage, and that changes. Is just changed. So it may vary over time, but it's essentially it's linked to that. So yeah, you've obviously got that money, which is the proof of money in your bank account at the point of application. But then you've obviously got all the other expenses that go along with trying to get a 12-month lease in place in time, or you're buying a house and the closing costs for that. So, there is other money associated that can make it quite challenging, especially for that upfront moment. And that's not even talking about shipping stuff from wherever you're coming from, cars and, anything else you decide to bring with you. Pets, they're an expensive one to bring up.
Yeah, I think we'll get into all those details in a little bit later. But I think just trying to understand whether you can or cannot come over to Portugal. Another point is financial planning, which is quite a big point. What's going to happen to your taxes? How's that going to work in Portugal? Where you're going to get taxed? How you're going to get taxed? And we have a financial advisor on board, and she, actually my wife, to be honest. Disclaimer. But it's very important to figure out exactly what happens. And if you need to have a chat with her, we're quite happy to refer you to her.
Well, I mean, just to add to that, I think a lot of it comes down to process planning. So, when's the right moment to exit a house? Let's say it's the US. If you're sitting in a state that doesn't charge capital gain, then you want to make sure you've exited the house before you get here, because if you do exit while you're here, then Portugal, you might be liable for capital gain. So there's just a few nuances that you want to be able to sit down and write a 5-year tactical plan and take that to the accountant or financial planner and say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. What are my potential headaches at this point? Because who knows what happens in 5 years' time. But at today, a decision day, that's the thing to be aware of.
And I think a very important thing as well is not taking tax at face value, because a lot of people look at Portugal and they say, okay, well, there's a 14 to 48% flat tax rate on your income, depending on, obviously it's a structured, depending depending on how much you earn. And that's not entirely true. If you look at that 48%, it's not always the case. We were just having a chat with our accountant the other day, and he's an incredible guy, and he was saying, many people don't actually do that. There are many ways around that to limit that tax exposure. So, and they're all legal as well. So it's very important to look a little bit more deeply, have a chat with the professionals, and figure out exactly what it is from your, from your standpoint.
Yeah, very much so. I think that it's not a one rule for all, and it's just a grandiose thing. There are offsets that can be made along the way. So the best consultancy money you're going to be paying is for that financial advice ahead of time, and it's not just the book value is 48%. That's not it. So get in touch and have those conversations early.
Okay. And now, once you've figured all that out, and you think, okay, excellent, I want to come to Portugal, I think the first step is actually to confirm your desires and come for a scouting trip. You may have been here for a holiday many years ago, but doing a scouting trip it's like coming here with a mission. Can we see exactly how you're going to live in Portugal, and just about the various areas where you can live in the Algarve. And we provide scouting day tours. So we can take you on a tour with either Nick or Dwight on our team. Sometimes I do them as well. And we can show you around the areas, like whether it's the central Algarve or West Algarve or the eastern Algarve. And people look at these things it's not just like, oh, here's a beautiful church and here's the history and all these stories about Portugal. It's where to live. It's and how do you find these tours, Nick? Do you enjoy them?
I do. I mean, for us, it's just such a wonderful moment to actually meet people and be able to talk to them and learn about their journeys and problems. I suppose the sort of, not the hidden thing, but one of the big benefits of the tours with us is, whether you like it or not, is being sat in the car with one of us for either 4 hours or whatever it may be, or 8 hours on a full day. Just to be able to chat. What is life? What are these things? Now, there's the other side of actually bespoking a tour to be able to get the most out of things, and show areas and places, and whether that's on a generalist or a specific. But I think they're great. They're great for us for letting clients and really getting to know people, and building up that sort of relationship. Even if they're not coming in, but it also gives us the chance to learn what people are worried about, what they're looking for, and and help guide on that as well.
And it definitely gives you a point on where to live in the Algarve, because that's vital, because you don't want to start looking for accommodation if you don't know where you're going to be living, because Lagos is a good solid hour away from Tavira, you know what I mean? So it's like we need to kind of nail these areas down so we can do our job better when we're doing a property search for you.
And sorry, just jumping in on that, on this topic of where to live in the Algarve, it's everyone, everyone's life, they would have seen this anyway. You don't know what life's got ahead of you, right? So my advice is, you're not looking to make a major mistake, like isolating yourselves in the northern part of the Algarve, on your first trip over here. It's, that I'd probably say don't do. For some, it might be more sensible just to take a property type that they'd never thought about. You may be leaving a homestead, in Colorado, but actually it's an apartment in Oleão that you end up in. And it might not be what you've ever dreamed about having, or the long-term dream, but sometimes just doing it means you get your feet on the ground. There might be a few more people, like-minded people in that area. You get to meet them. And then in years 1, 2, 3, you can make the decision on moving elsewhere. Whether that's renting or buying, it's a liquid place, and you can sell your property if you do go down that line. So I find, although no one wants to see the Algarve and explore, it's also like, you may be the Tavira today, but actually by the time you've been here 3 years, you might be going west, because that's where your social base is, or your dance club is, or whatever. So it's an incredibly important thing, but also, just don't worry that much about it, because you can uproot if you need to.
I think it's a very good point. But if you want like some tips on first steps, I think that, as I've said in my videos about where to live in the Algarve, the first thing is to analyze your requirements. And like Nick said, those requirements may change over time. Like, for example, you may be super set on staying 20 minutes away from the airport so you can fly back and forth. But then you realize that you don't actually need to do that. So you can move a little bit further away, or an hour's drive to the airport is not a problem, or schools are not a problem anymore because you're retired. So it's important, hospitals, etc. So just look at those different requirements and then figure out where you'd like to be. It's a good starting point. But like you said, it's not set in stone now.
No, and I agree. Like, I mean, if you come in with kids at a certain age, that changes, and therefore the social area might change. They go to university in a different place, and move on. And it's just you can't always win. But as I say, this is not buying in the middle of nowhere where you can't sell your house. If you've made a smart decision, you bought cleverly, then if that was the case, then you can sell up and move on. It's not it isn't the end of the world. But equally, one side of the Algarve to the other is what, an hour and a half from the Spanish border to the west coast. So, nothing's really very, very far. So yeah, and the only other key factors that might be important in that are like hospitals. But that's the stuff. Do that bit of homework. Find out what's important to you on day one, and then it makes life so much easier for us to try and just guide on areas that work and hit other requirements, or even just yourself, looking around.
Okay, that brings us to our fifth point: accommodation and renting versus buying. So, as a part of the D7 visa, which is, and again, I said, is the most common visa that people come in on, you need to supply a 12 months rental contract or
Yeah.
or a deed to a house. So, what do you suggest, Nick? What are you telling people all the time? You're saying rent first and then buy later, or what?
Well, I think the majority of our clients come in saying, "Oh, I think I want to rent first." And yeah, look, I understand it. It's a bit more mobility. Contractually in a 12-month lease here, because of the laws, you only actually have to serve 7 months, and the minimum you can serve is 7 months in that if you're serving the notices at the right place. So it's not actually a 12-month commitment, but you need the 12-month lease for the actual visa application. But I think it's that question of you've got to weigh up dead money, right? That's the way I look at it from a financial perspective. Renting is dead money, unless you're keeping capital and it's making money somewhere else, and you're kind of using that, versus buying, where your closing costs are dead money. So when you look at them, weigh them up against each other. Weigh up, okay, well, if I was renting with this place for 2 years and it was costing me, I don't know, $2,000 a month, you're looking at what, 48,000 euros, so you're buying a 500,000 euro house, say, you're looking between 6 and 8%, in closing costs. So in 2 years, you've wasted the same amount of money, even if you need to sell the house to move on. So, it becomes a little bit arbitrary after that, but then renting, you don't have the capital appreciation side. And, as an average over 2024, average in the whole of Portugal, it ticked up by 5.6%. I think we've got a higher exposure to capital growth down here at the moment than that, but still, that's pretty good going. So at the moment, smart money says buy if you're going to be in a renting pattern for 2 years, and your house buying versus your renting is a similar budget metric.
I think people obviously just want to come and look around for a bit and then settle down. But that's fine. You can come over for 3 months beforehand on a 90-day visa, and you can look around, right?
True. I get that. But then there's also nothing like a little more uncertainty. You don't know if your landlord wants the property back at the end of the time. What happens if you get into a bad rental, or anything like that? You've got bad neighbors that you didn't know. You won't know until you get in there. Of course, the same thing can happen when you buy a property, but at least you have a little bit more control over it. So, if it's an unsettling move anyway, like moving across the world, depending on where you're coming from, south to north, or west to east, or wherever it may be. So maybe having a house gives you a bit more security for those couple of years, and you can really feel like you're laying some foundations down.
Cool. So number 6, let's talk about buying a home in the Algarve. So how do you roll out the services to our clients? Like, I mean, obviously you start off with a property search, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so yeah, number 1 is obviously the a consultation call, really find out what someone's looking for, and majority of that stems to where do they want to buy, and and also what they want to buy, and depending on how informed everybody is, that could be, okay, well, hey, we want to be in this area and we want this, but this is our budget, and it might be like, okay, well, that's just an apartment. Or if you want to buy a home in that area, it's going to be a lot lower budget. So there's that initial consultation phase of trying to guide people through for what they want. We tend to have quite an open mind at the beginning, but we really, really do ask, to do the homework, to really try and narrow down the absolutely key points. Whether that's a town in itself, or whether that's proximity to something, or whatever it may be, to really kind of narrow that down in the early instance, because the more variables, the harder it becomes. Those are the first things. So get that done. Then, depending on whoever we're talking to's circumstance, it could be that we're on the ground or they're flying in. We prepare a tour, a physical tour of properties that we've gone backwards and forwards over a spreadsheet to work out the real ones that they want to see within budget. If things aren't in budget, it could be we think we can get a good deal on them or whatever it may be. We curate that process so we can get out there and see the properties. And sometimes that's the only way to do it, because property types are very different here to other parts of the world. And sometimes you just got to get out there, and there's no wasted time in our opinion. We're all, it's always great for us to see more and more things as well. But it's key for clients, I think, to see the variety of things that are out there to really help hone back to the ones that they want.
I'm just curious, like how often does it happen when somebody says, okay, I want, say, Tavira, for example, and they end up buying in Lagos, completely different?
Yeah, quite often. We had it with a couple. If they're listening to this, they'll know who it is. And they were all about Luz and Lagos, and being that close, sea view, etc. And they bought in Majua Grande, if I'm pronouncing that right. But it just happened. The house was a Hail Mary from us. Nothing that they'd seen or searched for. They walked in and was like, "This is it. This is where we want to be." And it was a countryside view more than anything. And that's great. It really is great to to sort of test and showcase other things, because sometimes you don't know.
And I guess we can talk about property all day, because that's one of our major focuses. But let's move on to healthcare. Do you want to say one point?
Before you move on, there is also just the a couple of bits about the actual bureaucratic side of it, and which is, if you're needing a mortgage, get in early. Talk about you can get pre-approved. Get in there, first. Make sure you've got all that paperwork, because it can only slow you down latterly. The risk departments always ask for that little bit more. So to be able to get that tick in the box early will help you. It means tactically we have a better position when buying than not. Currency, we see the world over at the moment, the yo-yoing of economic effects, and how they can impact that. And I only have to look at the pound versus the euro. It's dropped from 1.2 to 1.15 in the last week. So planning ahead, looking at money, buying beforehand if you're committing, looking at what your buying stages are and where you're going to need to put cash, and then budgeting that as well, I think is really, really important. You don't want to try and wait for the last minute to bring money in. So have those conversations with us, with professionals, currency brokers, and it can really help as well.
I think that's a great point that you bring up, because currency is such an important thing, isn't it? And even before you come on a scouting tour, go ahead and jump on and get one of those debit cards, because you save so much money. It's incredible. It really is. I'm not sure where we can put those links, but we've made a video about currency and who the people we work with, and it's very easy. You can just sign up and get a debit card, and you don't have to. If you're withdrawing money out of the bank, out of the wall here in Portugal, you're definitely losing money with your international bank credit cards.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even on every transaction, unless it's some sort of very wild, foreign focused, card, but even still, it's not. So, just look, even if you don't want to, take our word for it, just have a look, sign up, run a test, ask your bank what it would cost if you did this, and see what they say. The proof is in the pudding there. But I've used them from my perspective ever since I've been here for 14 years, and it's definitely saved me some money. Although, top tip, it won't save you any money if you go to a Euronet cash point. If you go to a Euronet cash point, they'll charge you the earth anyway. I think I lost 25% by pressing the wrong buttons and using their service, which is they're not multi-bancos. Multi-bancos are the free ones, where if you've got euros in your account, you can get it out for free. But Euronet, no.
Wow, good point. Thanks, Nick. Now, point number 7 in the relocation plan is healthcare in the Algarve. And basically, if you're looking at like the main places where we have hospitals, private hospitals, are Lagos, Portimao, and Faro. And soon there'll be one coming up in Tavira. And there's clinics all around the rest of the place. So as we have in Portugal, we've got public versus private healthcare systems. And generally, when you come over here for the first year, you'll need to be on the private healthcare systems until you have residency. Then you can get onto the public system. Nicholas, you're making a loud noise with your keyboard there.
Sorry, I was just putting a little text in the YouTube chat to say if anybody's got any specific questions, please put them in there and we can answer them as we go along.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Blythe Majors as well. He's put in a point there, so that's great. So yeah, please do drop the points in there and let us know if you've got any questions. So you got anything to say about healthcare, Nicholas?
No, I think you've obviously got your initial entry requirements for health or on an insurance sense, but then it comes down to your what you want to do as a person. The healthcare here is great. If you want to go private, then it's an affordable place to do private healthcare, especially when you compare it to the States, for example.
Most of all of our friends, all foreigners, are here, all on private medical.
Yeah, I mean, but
many people doing it.
And that being said, a lot of the private hospitals, the doctors will be on rotation, so they'll spend 2 or 3 days in the private and 2 or 3 days in the public. So they are the same people. In general, there'll be a few specialists, but generally speaking, they have to do the rotation. So the skill set's shared. So it just depends on your potential capabilities financially.
Okay, point number 8, schooling in Portugal. Yeah, that's obviously vital if you've got kids of school going age. If you're retired, clearly it doesn't matter. The private schools, last count, there were about 16, 17 private schools around the Algarve, private international schools, and obviously public Portuguese schools, they're all over the place. And the level of public schooling is actually really, really good here. I mean, your kids are at public school, aren't they, Nick? And as was mine when she was younger, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my two are young, 3 and 6. But my wife, who came here when she was 6, and her brother, who was 4, I think at the time, they went through the system. And if you're, I can't moan about it. I think they're both very, very clever and have turned out pretty well. And he's gone on to get 3 master's degrees and a PhD. So it can handle any level of capability.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that the exams here, when kids are coming from the UK to Portugal, they're actually a little bit more difficult, more tough, and more strenuous, more stringent here in Portugal. So the level of education is higher than in the UK.
Well, that was the one that shocked me when I heard that you can fail a year here. So if you don't pass the year, you stay down until you have to repeat it. So that's not the UK system doesn't do that. So for anyone coming from that side, it is a bit of a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now driving in Portugal is actually quite a common concern. I mean, we've been here for so long that it's just absolutely fine. Going on roundabouts all the time. There are hardly any traffic lights here. Got roundabouts all over the place. But getting your license and things like that, we've made videos about this. We made one video all about driving in Portugal. We've got a detailed blog post about driving in Portugal. It's at algarveaddicts.com/driving, and hopefully I'll be able to pop that in the link in the description a little bit later. But yeah, have a look. You need to change your license over. So a top tip is to try and get, and when you change your license over to a Portuguese driver's license, you have to submit your international driver's license to the Portuguese authorities. So if you can, try and make a copy of it beforehand. Not just get another one. I mean, don't make a copy of it. Driving, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I never really sort of seem to have a problem. Similar rules. If you're driving and you're the driver, you're always in the middle of the road. So that's never a bad one to forget.
Don't turn right on red. That's an important point.
Yeah, but roundabouts, as you say, are like one of the key ones. But they have a lot of slip roads here where you're coming off one road system onto another, and some have runoffs and some don't, and some don't. So don't take chances. I'm still learning it. I forget it all the time, and it's always a shock when you've got cars behind you coming in a lot of speed, coming off that junction as you're coming on. So it takes a little bit to get used to, but otherwise, it's worth looking at a couple of videos just to ingratiate yourself. And they don't really like indicators here. That's another shock I found is coming from the UK, that not many people use indicators. So you kind of just got to go with the nose of the car and see where they're off to.
And I think buying cars here are generally more expensive. So just watch out for that and go and familiarize yourself with the different types of cars that are available here. because they generally are a little bit more expensive than especially than the UK and the US. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but
well, it's. I mean, Portugal's been charging this additional taxation on cars for a long time, and have been fined by the EU for however many years. But the fines that they collect are higher than the fines that they get given. So they sort of continue to do it, which has created a market where secondhand cars perceivably and literally are more expensive. But it's one of these things. Once you're in the market and when you're in the market and having bought one, it's sort of, you're at that level. So it's just getting to that level. It feels a bit of a weird jump, so it's not perfect in that sense. And yes, okay, our neighbor across the way in Spain, things are a lot cheaper in that sense, but it's not, you just got to shift your mindset on it, basically. I think once you've got your mindset through, you'll be okay.
Cool. Let's shift our mindset to shopping in the Algarve. So shopping 20 years ago was really much more different than it is today, where there's shopping malls all over the place. There's shopping malls in Lule, Portimao, Faro, everywhere. So it's very, very easy to shop. The main grocery stores all over the place. I mean, even in our small town of Sabras del Portel over here, we've got about 11,000 people. There are all these grocery stores like Continent, which is one of the biggest brands, Intermarché, Pingo Dos, Aldi, Lidl, all these major European brands. So it's really easy to shop and find anything you need. And if you want to go shopping online, there's tons of stuff online as well. We don't have an Amazon in Portugal yet, but it's easy to order from Amazon.es, which is a Spanish equivalent, or anywhere within Europe. Don't order from the UK or the USA, whatever you do, because you just tax.
DE works really well. It's much bigger than for some reason than the ES. Whenever I need anything, I do buy it from there. And it's still pretty quick.
And it's available in English, I think. I think somebody mentioned that Amazon.es was changing to English as well. So, but I've
DE definitely operate in English.
Yeah, excellent.
But yeah, I mean, shopping in general here, your main sort of retail shopping is focused around shopping centers. This is the predominance. We don't have a massive high street culture here. The high streets are sort of dominated by cafes and restaurants and estate agents, and sort of that kind of their business. Whereas you'll find boutiques. Don't get me wrong, and you will. Then that fashion is generally outside of the shopping malls is dominated by them in the Algarve, that is. But we have these big shopping centers in Mar and the Forum in Faro and Gia in Gia. Those shopping centers, do cover off all the main stuff you're going to need from a fashion
perspective. It just feels like more and more shopping centers are popping up all over the place. And
well, I mean, you look at
the shopping is expanding as well radically.
Yeah, exactly. As I was going to say, they're adding another 25 shops to the outlet mall. The outlet mall, you've got Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, Timberland, and sorry, I do know this. Not that I'm a shopaholic. I just walk through it every day. So
But it is important. Like also for household goods, there's a big store called Leroy Merlin, and there's this new thing called Naturalia, I think it is, for outdoor furniture, which is an offshoot of Leroy Merlin. So people a few years ago said to me, "Oh, what am I going to do? Where am I going to get stuff from our house?" And it's you can find stuff all over the place. Okay, so number 11, working in the Algarve. Generally, as a rule, either it's easy to retire to the Algarve, or it's easy to bring your work with as a digitally, you know what I mean? Like work for somebody remotely or set up your own business here digitally. Because working in the Algarve, there's not much, it's not a metropolitan area, you know what I mean? It's like these towns all separated along. So it's not a hugely concentrated work environment. There's no real big corporates around here. So you're going to have to be quite creative if you're looking to come and work in the Algarve. I always say there's three major industries here. There's tourism, construction, and real estate. And we know so many real estate agents. It's unbelievable. So what do you say about working in the Algarve, Nick? Would you ever move over here to further your career?
Depends on what your career is in, but you're right. I think, this place is an amazing place to retire to, but also if you can, earn your dollars and pounds and euros digitally, then it really is good. Unless you're getting into recreation, lifestyle stuff where you are a yoga teacher and your business is focused like that. If you've got some grander, career, let's say, the sort of suppose, the cookie cutter career perspective of trying to join a Deloitte and go up the ranks there, or join a Google and and learn your trade there. We don't have that. You got to go up to Lisbon for that. So if you're that way inclined, but this place does cultivate a lot of entrepreneurs, and it can be a good place, but not if you want a traditional corporate 9-to-5 job.
And if you are looking at a traditional corporate 9-to-5 job, Portuguese is a necessity. I don't think you can just cruise into Lisbon and expect them to speak English for you. I mean, obviously at the higher levels of business, everybody will speak English, but I think a lot of it's conducted in Portuguese.
Yeah.
All right. Number 12, what to do in the Algarve, activities and adventures. Now, what are you going to do in the weekends in the Algarve? There's just so much to do. Generally, it's very beach focused because we've got so many beautiful beaches and the weather's generally good. But for those sort of months over the winter where it's pouring with rain, like we've had a really horrendous spring this year, and it's been raining for a lot. There's sort of like limited things to do. You can go hiking in the rain, but like for example, with your kids, Nick, I mean, you've got lots. You always sort of seem to be going to kids' birthday parties and things like that. But they used to have quite a few. What is it? Kids' places where you can go in kids' play areas.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, as you say, maybe destination focus doesn't really matter because the Algarve's pretty small. But for youngsters, like, I mean, actually in Lule, there's a phenomenal skate park that we found recently. Not that my kids are actually into skating, but they're on their little bikes and they love to go up and down around the ramps. But the actual parks in Portugal are, or that I've experienced in the Algarve, are fabulous. There seem to be really good spaces, big spaces, well maintained. So if you want to kick a ball about, play on the municipal courts, whether there's, the swimming pools are generally super cheap. There are a few more sort of soft play activities. I think that's what you were looking for earlier for like kids, if as and when it is raining. They're still not dime a dozen, but they are there and handy. There's a good couple of water parks, across the Algarve, which are brilliant to go to. But you're right. I mean, the majority of stuff is either outdoor life focused, biking, hiking, walking, or on the beach.
Which is extremely healthy. It's a wonderful outdoor lifestyle here. It really is great. So yeah, get involved in that. So now then the 13th point to think about in your relocation plan are the nuts and bolts, NIFs and bank accounts. You know what a NIF is? It's a identification number. It's a financial identification number. It's vital to get that before you do anything in Portugal. And then you can get a bank account thereafter, and then you're away and off to the races. And number 14, timings and project plans. So timings are generally, it's very, very difficult to say the timings because at this point in time, we've got a huge delay with the relocation, well, not relocation, it's the government, the border control agency, AMA. But generally,
but that doesn't,
sorry, you go.
So I was going to say that doesn't prohibit you in your process. I mean, ultimately you're, the sort of the rough thing is you've got to get your appointment, right? States, if you're coming from the States, you've got to get it stateside, to be able to come here. Now, that's a timeline in itself. That's the hardest thing at the moment, talking to the lawyers, is that's the one that's taking up the most time. So whatever that timeline might be, just say 2 months. Once you've had that appointment with all your documentation, you're looking at another 2.5 to 3 months to get your temporary visa to arrive. Then you're in Portugal. Once you've got that, you can come to Portugal. Then it's kind of a sit and wait until you get your IMA appointment. That's the one you were talking about there with the border force. That, yes, but you're in Portugal at that stage. That hasn't held it up. So the things that hold things up are, getting that initial appointment, and then, then the actual waiting phase to get your visa in, your temporary visa to arrive. But that being said, if you're in a super rush, we had it with a client. She came here. She'd been trying since December to try and get an appointment. Nothing. After kind of doing a tour with us, chatting it all through, she decided to go back and just do a walk-in appointment and got it. Let's say 3 weeks after her. The time she was here in Portugal, was over the moon. She just texted me 2 days ago or something saying, "I've now got it. I'm on my way." So you can bring it forward if you want to, but for a lot of people, going to the timings and project plan. The project plan isn't just about that bit. It's about exiting your life. Where you're coming from, selling houses, cars, getting rid of all the stuff if you don't want to bring it with you. Most people don't.
But it's very
chaps for
difficult to say. But what about an average time for the visa process, for the D7 visa? Would it be from start to finish about what, 6 months?
to get the actual IMA, to finish your IMA appointment and become a temporary resident, that's 6 months from your first appointment to then. But that's not, I say, there's no rough. That's a rough rule of thumb. So however long it takes you to get your appointment, you tag on to the beginning end, and then if there's delays this side, which there can be, but they're getting better now. A lot of clients are getting, when they're given the temporary visa, they are getting their residency appointment with IMA. And it could be anywhere. Like the most recent one I had, someone's got it in Braga. They're moving to the Algarve, and they're just getting this date and up in Braga. So you are going to get some wild things happen, but at least you've got your appointment.
Great. Okay, so we just so that's the whole relocation plan that we talked about, and this is available in our relocation document, which is on our website, so you can go check that out. But let's answer a few questions, shall we? So there's Sharon Ella says, what do we know about the universities in Portugal? How is the experience for US students? To be honest, the universities, I don't know that much about. We've been to Coimbra University, which is the oldest one in the country. What I do know is that they're really cheap compared to the United States of America. Probably something like just over €1,000 a year, or something like that, for some. So it's unbelievably cheap, and there's great quality. So
I think that's it. I mean, when you're looking at, well, like with any university, right, it's about focusing on your specialisms. The Algarve is not a generalist university place. Its specialisms are in, the sort of sea environment and and aspects like that. So it is worth looking around. The older, bigger institutions are obviously up north. So yeah, just have a look for it. Generally speaking, I can't talk about US citizen students, but I know we have a very, very healthy foreign student population, as most universities do, and they are somewhat the lifeline because they're not so subsidized as the Portuguese students in terms of coming here. So it's still cheap, but it's certainly how they make a bit of money. So they'll always welcome, I think, is the easiest thing to say.
But Sharon, I would suggest you probably get in touch with the universities directly and just ask them those questions, if that's vital for you. So Alan says, hi chaps, retiring now and may move from London to Portugal in late 25 or early 26. Using the 90 days to find a place to buy seems like a push. Better for me to rent for a year first and get D7 visa. Well, we kind of discussed that in the first half of this point, didn't we? So it just depends what you can find in your first 90 days over here.
Well, I think, it doesn't take 90 days in any way, shape or form.
No, the only reason we're talking about 90 days is because that's the visa.
Yeah, sure.
So waiver.
London's not the biggest hop from here. I think the problem lies in the time you can take off work or get away from life, whether you're in your dependents, let's say, during that time. So, but having said that, it doesn't take more than 2 or 3 days to get a good lay of the land of the Algarve in general, about what has appealed to you and what hasn't. It is kind of, let's say, the plus side of watching the videos that we create and also talking to us is that if someone comes with a lot of information and questions, we can really help narrow that focus down to specific locations, and then it's about getting into the real detail on those those locations to see if it actually works. So actually doing that actually doesn't take that long. And then finding a house, again, we can do, if you want to work with us, we do all the desktop stuff for and we can go backwards and forwards on stuff. Equally, like when it comes down to finding properties, we can go out and see things. Let's just say we refined a list of 15. We can start really honing that down to 8 by going to see things, talking to agents in more detail, looking at Google Earth, all that stuff, and then go and see properties. And then I'll be like, look, I don't think this one works because you're not going to like the quarry next door, or the noise from the A22, and then suddenly that's down to 4 properties. So and we've done it very successfully actually with a client, in December, who threw us a spreadsheet of 35 properties, I think it was, and then they arrived on the ground. We narrowed it down, to 8 by that stage, through availability and also the top things, and then we ended up making 2 offers within the second day of touring. So if you've got that narrow thing, you can be picking between those 8 to 10 or 15 properties within a week for sure.
Okay.
It depends. Sorry, the only thing to add to that is it depends on the decisiveness. If you've still got things that are making you indecisive, yes, that doesn't help. But goes back to what I said earlier. If you're making a relatively smart decision on the property and its potential resale value, then it's your hold is a good couple of years, if that, before you can flip it on.
Great. Okay. So Blythe Majors is chatting to our accountant tomorrow. He's just letting us know, and he's going to find out about the taxes. So it's great to have you on board, Blythe. Thanks for watching. It's nice to hear from you, mate. We went on a tour with Blythe a couple of weeks ago. Jeffrey Dalton asks if we can discuss high-speed internet availability in different areas of the Algarve, up, down speeds, type of service, reliability. Well, I can tell you, I live in just about the middle of nowhere, a very countryside place, and we've got fiber in here. And we get 500 megs a second, which is great, up and down. So it's really, really excellent. And the 5G internet around here is also excellent. The only problem we've had is when you're in a shopping center or on a shopping mall, and they kind of block you out. But generally around the Algarve, it's fantastic. It really is. If you even in a small town like where I live, 12,000 people, there's high-speed fiber coming in and out, and it's relatively cheap.
You've got the classic big corporations that handle all the mobile phones and internet services. That are here. Some are good, some are bad. Some use SIM cards in their boxes. Some use dedicated fiber. The fiber network's been getting so much better over the years. I use more of a private firm and get a 750 meg dedicated line. I could get a gigabyte with them if I wanted. I know of Vodafone offered me €26 a month for a 1 gigabyte line. Apparently it's not throttled and is dedicated. So, I think they've grown up a little bit from the bad days of throttling and using, almost not quite dial up, but that stuff. And then be it as it may, whether you want to use them or not, but Musk's Starlink service works here. So if you are very remote, then you can use that. And I believe the European there's a Euronet one coming as well, where they use the same satellite services, to be less reliant on just his service. So, things are happening, tech's changing. So if you do, I went to see a house in the hills around Monchique, and there was definitely no real cell service, as well as dedicated lines, and they use Starlink really well, and they were gamers, and they could stream their line constantly, so didn't have a problem there.
Well, Jeffrey, just for relevance, as I said, I just did a speed test now. It's 502 megs download and 330 megs upload, so that's not bad for the middle of nowhere. All right. So there no other questions on YouTube? I don't even know what's going on Facebook, even if it's actually streaming or not. But we've got some other questions. Should we dig into these, Nick?
Yeah, while you do that, I'll have a look on Facebook just in case. We don't want to miss anybody out.
No, you're right. Okay, so we're talking about, somebody's asking about property tax. What's the website for checking and paying property taxes in Portugal? I think they're due in May. And how do you update your account info with the tax office? I mean, that's all taken place on the the finances portal, correct, Nick?
Yes, yes, and sorry, I'm a bit of an ignorant in that. I let my accountant do it. So
yeah. Well, basically, when the IMI comes to you, they actually send you a letter in the post, and you can pay it through your bank or through your phone or whatever. It's easy as hell to pay the property tax. I think that's what their goal is, to make it easy. And sometimes they split it up. The IMI sometimes gets split up like 2 or 3 payments per year. Just depends. So yeah, and electricity accounts. Can you explain electricity account levels in Portugal? What do you mean electricity account levels in Portugal?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. So you basically get different different strengths. When I bought my house, I was I had a certain level, and every time I had a toaster on, and then I turn a heater on, and the whole thing would go. And it's the potency level that basically you can pay for 3 different ones within the residential band, and that is just giving you enough power to deal with the spikes, that you might have with hair dryers and toasters and air conditioning units, and essentially they come with a different price band. I think I've got the highest potency you can in residential. And I want to say it starts at about 30. That starts my bill at €30 a month standard, I think, off the top of my head. I could be wrong there, but essentially they're banded for the level of potency. So if you've only one, it's only one person, and you're switching things off, and you're not going to have the swells and sort of the peaks, then you can just live off the first one and not have to pay that additional rate.
Great. Did you find any questions on Facebook, Nick?
No, I haven't found it on Facebook. I'm not sure it's on.
I think it's actually on my profile, but anyway. So there's a question here from Nadia, who was actually on our YouTube channel earlier. She says, I'm really interested in how I can deal with Portuguese people who are a bit hostile towards foreigners because they think that they're stealing their life's work, livelihood. In Spain, they're protesting against this global political problem. And I think we're confusing things a little bit here. I think that in Spain, they're protesting against tourism, like over tourism as well. But I could be incorrect. And to be honest, we haven't found anybody who's hostile at all. The only sort of like bit of hostility you find is slightly online, where some Portuguese people will comment. But then again, you're going to get hostility wherever you go online because there's no repercussions. It's like these keyboard warriors. But in reality, in life, no one's ever come up to me and said, hey, you foreigner, get out of my country. No one's ever said that to me. They've all been absolutely polite and wonderfully warm and welcoming. And I think you've had a similar experience, Nick.
Yeah, even when they know that you're helping people come over to Portugal.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
14 years and only been welcoming. Especially, look, the Algarve in itself. I can't talk about the further farmlands up north, and maybe there is, but that's going to stem to language more than anything. That's perhaps the intolerance for non-Portuguese speaking people, potentially.
But even I've heard that that's not a problem. I've even heard that local Portuguese go out of their way to try and assist foreigners and like leave fruit at their door and things like that, especially in central Portugal.
But you're gonna, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. There will always be something, a little bit of something somewhere. But as I say, down here in the Algarve, hand on heart, 14 years of being here, I've never felt at any moment that someone's like, oh God. Well, they got the nickname for English people is beefers, roast beef, beefers, and I've never had anyone give me jip for being who I am in this country.
A roast beef eating Englishman. I think that comes from
and I suppose I'm probably the worst because my Portuguese isn't great, So I think in that I'm the worst of the worst in the fact that I've been here for a long time and I still don't speak fluently. So and again they still like me to my face.
Yeah. And Yvonne asked a question. She says they're thinking they want to explore the country before deciding where to settle. She wants to rent, furnish in the Algarve in the winter and move north in the summer. Move, say, twice a year for a few years. And she said she read somewhere that that's not a good idea due to visa requirements needing to maintain an address for a year. Yeah, and you do, don't you? What did you say? You said 7 months, Nick? You need to maintain that address for 7 months.
No, that's just if you're going for a long term. So on the initial application, you need to have a proof of residency, and that needs to be a 12-month contract, of which you are legally bound for 7 months. So yes, if you want that kind of lifestyle, you need to be here first, post application phase. Then I believe it's not as onerous. I've got clients going through that at the moment, and I'm wondering whether they need a 12-month, and some people say yes and some people say no. So it's a bit of a gray area that, this is the renewal side I'm talking about. But once you're sort of here and you've got that legal document, then flipping for a year in Airbnbs and other places, I can't see how they can stop you. But the major point is having an address to be receiving documentation or communications. If you're jumping around all the time, it'd be hard to do that. So it might be something you want to talk to your lawyer or a lawyer about, or a representative who can help and maintain that address from a communications perspective throughout the process.
Okay, excellent. There was another question from somebody who emailed you, I think. Where can we taste olive oil? Did you hear that question?
I haven't heard that question.
It said, local experiences, when and where can you do an olive oil tasting in Portugal? And there is
Well,
a
we know
place that's
some.
just opened up in Tavira as you drive into Tavira on the right-hand side. And I'm trying to remember what it's called now. I'm just actually looking for it at the moment.
Well, we've got some South African clients that've got some lovely olive oil. I'm sure they'll be welcome for me to pass the details on to you. They gave me a bottle as a present, but no, that's a good one. I don't know that. You guess you'd have to find some olive farms and olive groves, and find out where they are. And there's definitely a very local thing.
There it is. It's called Algarve Tavira. I found it. Okay, and it's just opened up. It's pretty new. I think it's like 15 to 20 euros per person. You can go there and
did you write that question?
No, I didn't write that question.
You sure?
Yes, it came from me. I think it was from John, actually, from John
Okay.
and Malia. Yeah. So it was with that. Yeah. So that's a great place to go to. But there are lots of olive oil lagars, they're called, as the name says, Al Lagar in Tavira. But they don't necessarily offer tours and tastings. They generally just you take your olives there and then they just give you a bottle or two as a result afterwards. So yeah. But wine farms will do a little bit of it as well. I think a lot of wine farms have some olives on them as well, but that's all hearsay. I don't think we have much left, Nick. I think this is it's 50 minutes. It's been a good substantial thing. I know you've got to go to another birthday party for your kids. So
it's pizza and beer. So no. Actually, just looking at that, there was another part of their paying property taxes in Portugal that was raised there. We didn't touch on one of the points below. Was about when they're due. Yes, I think May is the time that they're due, and they're normally, depending on your level, can be split into 2 to 3 payments. Then all due in one go. I think we pay 750 a year, split into three payments. The payments come down to the size of the property, and they're basically based on the patrimonial value of your property, which is the government's assessment of the value of your property. So if you're buying €1 million home, it's not based on €1 million. It will be way less, and then the scale goes down. So yeah, they're sort of due in different, but normally they're pretty good if you've got the right, if you have been if you have put your communication details with them, they will email you and send you letters, or not email you, send you letters.
Okay. Yeah, I found another one, NIF usage. So the NIF is your national identification number. And are there benefits or drawbacks to adding your NIF number to receipts? So when you go into a shop like Continent, a big grocery store, they'll always ask you at the end saying, would you like a contribuint or a NIF to add this to your purchase? And if you add your number in there, then it's just basically a way of the government keeping track of all your purchases and making sure that you're paying your taxes and getting building a bigger picture of you. But you can get discounts at the end of the year when you submit those things. I don't know exactly how it works. Have you got an idea?
I mean, it's kind of almost done automatically. The best I think a lot of it's come down to the VAT discounts you can get. So you can't get discounts there and there at the front, but on certain goods at the end of the year, depending on your income level, then you can get money back rebated for things you've spent money on, throughout like core service, can be seen as core services. So it can certainly help. But if you're coming in under a tax regime, I'm under the NHR, not really because I'm really clever and wanted to come here on that. It just was circumstantial for me, but there's nothing I can really do to benefit from it, for 10 years. So if you're under a sort of scheme, then no, there is no benefit. But definitely is one, your accountant, which you really should have when you come here, especially in the first couple of years, just to gauge that and make sure your returns are done. Even if you're not earning any money here, you still need to be, if you're here as a tax resident, you need to be showing them what you've done abroad and also submitting your zero taxation here. So it's important to do. I see Jeffrey Dalton's just popped up in the YouTube chat saying, are you seeing any D8 visa folks being able to qualify for the new NHR 2.0? Is this something your team can help with? We actually had a video go live. Is it gone live? Have we done that one?
No, not yet. It'll be coming up next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we actually met Ricardo Chaves, who is the accountant we suggest people go to talk to him about Ifiki. Is that how you
pronounce it? Or Tisri. Yeah, Tisri.
And which is what everybody thinks is an NHR 2.0. Look, there are, for certain industries, it is definitely viable. It's a little bit more complicated, but essentially it does not help anyone with retirement plans. It is really more for people who are going to be earning over, I think and can show that they're getting 50% of their income from foreign-based sources. So I think it is really attractive for people under a DA visa, but only if you're in specific sectors, and it's not that clear. And actually what we're waiting for at the moment from him is the list of types of services that it can go down to communication. So you could be writing a blog, I think, or publishing books or magazines.
I think it's going to be much more complex than that, but yeah, but definitely look out for that video, Jeffrey. It's coming out on Wednesday afternoon.
And Jeffrey, if you want to get in touch, just go to the website and contact us. So we've got your email, and when I get this flyer through that has all the industries, I can send you that and then put you in touch with them if you want to have a detailed chat. And
that website that you mentioned is algarveaddicts.com.
Sorry, wildest. And then Anne Henderson, great information. I agree with your trial run idea. Much gratitude for your time and knowledge. Oh, thank you, Anne.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for your questions, and thank you all for your questions. We really appreciate them, and some of those who emailed in and asked questions earlier. But there is one last question. Somebody asked, was the weather this past year normal for Portugal? And no, it wasn't normal. And we're talking about this spring. Recently, the country hasn't seen this much rain for 20 years, they said. It's been an absolute anomaly, but it's great because, all our dams are filled up. And so we've got a lot of drought was a big thing on everyone's lips for the last 3 years. And so that's been eradicated. We should be absolutely good for a couple of years, which is great. So yeah, there's been a phenomenal amount of rain received.
It's great. It is that, it's not been fabulous when you spend a load of money and flown halfway across the world to get, 3 months worth of rain. I get that. But, who knows with global warming, whether it's going to come back or not. But, it is, as I say, really, really unseasonal. But a bit like the tourists, this is the point I want to kind of marry to each other. It's a bit like, everyone's saying, oh, it's crazy. It's the chaotic place in the summer and blah, blah. Well, that's how we exist in the Algarve. The 10 weeks of the summer that, we have a lot of people. I think something like 2.5 million people, that come in. They fuel the businesses for the rest of us to enjoy the countryside, during for the remainder of the year. So you kind of put up with it. And even still, it's not that bad. If anyone's lived in a major city, London, anywhere.
Yeah, we were talking to some Americans the other day. They're saying exactly the same thing. It's like, this is nothing compared to LA or New York or whatever in the summer.
Yeah. The downside is my counterparts, in the UK that may come over for just a boozy holiday to a place like Albufeira, and they burn themselves to lobsters. They drink at 9 a.m. in the morning, and they kind of just cause trouble. Yeah, how is that any different to spring break in Cabo or somewhere like that? So there is a place for it. Just avoid it. And I really don't think you're going to see a problem at all in any way, shape or form. So we love the tourists. It's crazy. Yes, it's crazy from the normal life. And we love the rain because at least we can drink water for the rest of it. And there's no hosepipe ban. So if it comes, it's annoying. But hey, it means that we can enjoy the year for the rest, the time for the rest of the year.
Excellent. Well, guys, thank you very much. And thank you all for your comments out there. It's been really amazing doing this. And Nick, thanks for your expertise and insight.
No, my pleasure. And I would say I'd save you a slice of pizza, but I'm not going to.
I'm going to go and have a fantastic Sunday lunch now in the sun because it's a beautiful day today. Okay, guys, have a great week. We'll see you maybe next week, maybe not. Maybe we're actually going to take an Easter break next week. And then
wait. You haven't run this one past me. Well, we'll be having words later.
All right. Cheers, guys. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Oh, where'd you go?